you look at, say, 2014 to 2024, over a 10-year period, how mature the event organizers have become with weather and understanding that it's a real threat to that. I'm kind of curious how you've seen that change over your time with the ESA and how events have sort of handled that.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, ESA comes out of weather tragedy. The 2011 Indiana State Fair stage roof collapse, and we came together realizing that we didn't know exactly what we should do, but we knew we had to do something. And we were very fortunate to build this relationship with what is now DTN and learn from each other and grow and be continually responsive to the new threats that we're facing, both in terms of weather and the new changing event world that we have. Things are getting, events are getting larger and more complex, and both ESA and DTN are having to adjust to that.
What are some of those best practices that you've seen that work? Do I make the easy decision or the best decision? When you're thinking best decision as it pertains to weather, what do you think is, like, if you had to model what an excellent event and they prepare for weather, what does that look like?
I mean, I think everything in terms of weather, and I'd say all aspects of event production, but we'll keep it focused on weather. It's an awareness of what threats are actually facing your event, and those threats, as we've kind of discussed offline before, are ever evolving and growing more frequent and more severe. So, having that a risk assessment, so you understand what threats your event faces, and developing a plan to be able to respond to those proactively, not waiting until the last minute and when it's, the storms are coming on in and you're going, all right, what are we going to do now? We can't operate like that anymore. And I'm very encouraged because the industry seems to have picked up on that. And we are seeing a lot more organizers, developing event, a weather decision. Pardon me. We have seen a lot of organizers developing, severe weather action plans to be able to respond to these and to be able to communicate to all stakeholders, both internally and externally. And like I said, making the tough decision in advance so you can be sure that attendees are aware that your, any show stop, show pause, or evacuation plans are able to be implemented effectively.
When you see weather as a threat, like what are some of the unique weather threats that you've seen that maybe might not be quite as impactful to us on a normal day, but you put it around an event environment? What kind of sort of weather perils do you commonly see need to really be watched out for at an event to make those decisions?
Wind and lightning have remain a priority, but what we're starting to see now are issues related to extreme heat. That is becoming more of a factor, and sort of dispersed threats such as wildfire smoke. I mean, these are things that a few years ago weren't really even on our radar as event organizers. We would know that it would get hot and we would have to maybe water the crowd or provide some sort of shading capability, but something related to smoke coming in from Canada and affecting an event in Chicago, for example, never really factored that in, but we are increasingly seeing that coming into play. So I think planning for things that are new, such as heat, such as wildfire smoke, that's definitely a focus of ours.
One thing that's intriguing to me in our work with events that I don't necessarily deal with in other industries that have weather concern is the fact that many of the operations and events move city to city, state to state, maybe even country to country at times. What do you think is an important for, say, a tour or a group that might move around to have consistency in developing that weather action plan so that if they move to a new city and the threats change, but the operations are somewhat similar, to adapt to that environment of kind of moving from location to location?
If we're looking at something related to a concert tour that is going to, say, fixed amphitheaters or whatnot, the venues that they are arriving to should have their own weather action plan in place. So in that case, it becomes a matter of communication between the tour and the venue to be sure that whatever plans and procedures that they have in place are in alignment, and any conflicts that happen to be there are worked out well in advance. Something, a tour may not necessarily know what they're going to face in Chicago versus what they're going to face in Los Angeles or the Netherlands, for example. So that communication between both entities. If we're talking more kind of one-off events or annual events such as festivals or whatnot, it's that organizer will end up developing that plan, and that comes down to having a very comprehensive understanding of where you are putting your event and all the possible threats that you're facing.
We often think about events as like in weather and events as an outdoor thing. So how do you think about event safety for indoor venues, much like we often think about for outdoor venues?
Related to weather, it kind of goes back to the same thing. You're not necessarily facing the same impacts from a weather-related threat, but you will face them. So if you're an indoor venue, you still need to be aware of, what your risk of high winds is. The threats are different. The process is the same.
So mainly, so it's the focus on preparation, and then if you have preparation and communication plan in place, then the decision becomes easier, sort of, right?
I don't say you can only respond to the threats that you know, but you can best respond to the threats that you are aware of. You don't want to be just making these decisions on the fly. It's much easier to tell your attendees, don't come tonight, we're going to postpone, than it is to get them all there and say, we're not going to do this, everybody go home. And going back a little bit to the sustainability and the climate change aspect of it, because of a lot of the programs that organizers are trying to put in place to respond to that, such as carpooling, taking mass transit, all of these things that we're encouraging to help the big picture climate, can end up impacting your ability to respond to a threat as it comes in. If you encourage everyone to take the train to your show and you have to, evacuate people to their vehicles, well, they don't have vehicles. And if you don't have the ability to shelter folks in your venue and they don't have vehicles, what are you going to do with them? So got to know all this stuff in advance.
One weather plan doesn't fit all. There's a customization that's needed to each event in order to prepare properly for that specific event.
Exactly. Something as basic as doing an outdoor amphitheater in Indianapolis and moving to an outdoor amphitheater in Chicago or Columbus, 90% of your plan may stay the same, but that 10%, you just don't know. And you have to be sure that you are altering your plan for every single event.
Knowing that there's customization and information can be different, sort of spot to spot, and communication different, and so forth. What kind of tools exist for event organizers to really have a capture on these threats and be able to enact those plans no matter where they go?
Wow. I I think, not a sales pitch, but I will put it to this way. The greatest tool you can have in your toolkit is access to professional meteorologists. And, known, whether or not they happen to be public sector or private sector, having a line to someone who has an innate understanding of these things that most event organizers don't have is, to me, the best tool that you can have. um, and there are technologies out there that can give you an idea, but nothing replaces the human behind it.
What do you think it is about the human to human interaction with a meteorologist and the event worker or event decider that supersedes just receiving that information, from an app or something of that nature?
Yeah, perfect example. I'll reach over here. We all have, well, it disappeared, but we all have one of these, right? We all have a little phone in our pocket that we can pull up a screen and see pretty red, green, yellow blobs coming at our events. Do you know what that means? I don't. I know that something might be there, but I am not a professional meteorologist. I cannot interpret that data. I rely on professionals to be able to say, yeah, what you're seeing on your screen, don't worry about it, because it may not be anything. But more importantly, you could be looking at something that isn't a threat, and it could very much be a threat. So unless you are a trained meteorologist, you're not going to be able to determine that. And thankfully, there are resources out there serving our industry that can answer those questions for you.
This actual season coming up, it's been a very hectic severe weather season. We're expecting that to continue for the next few months, expecting really high heat this summer in parts of the country. And to top it off, a very active hurricane season. So there's no shortage of really busy weather that will likely hit our way over the next 3 to 6 months. What in particular for a very busy season should event organizers be thinking about, to handle the fact that there may be even more disruptions than in a normal year?
Whew, yeah, I would have never thought, being here on the West Coast, that hurricanes would have been a thing until one hit Southern California last year, and it went, wait a minute, we got to think about these things now. I just got used to earthquakes, right? But you're right. It is shaping up to be a very active event season. We've already seen several high-profile cancellations that, due to impending weather or even the threat of severe weather. And that's obviously very disappointing to all stakeholders, both the attendees and the organizers. But to me, it's encouraging. It means that we are learning from past mistakes, and we are becoming more comfortable making tough decisions in advance. So, I'll go back to my initial line. It's the best thing organizers can do is have a solid understanding of the threats that they are facing and having a plan in place to be able to respond to that, and utilizing all available resources, whether that's a private meteorological service, whether that's developing a relationship with your national weather center outpost, whether that is, visiting the Event Safety Alliance website and downloading NCES 1.7 weather preparedness standard, or visiting one of our weather planning for mass gatherings workshops. All of these tools help build your knowledge to be able to understand these threats and be able to respond to them. So I am very encouraged by where our industry happens to be right now, and I expect that to only get better.